How you been, bro? You're getting in a lot of fights.
Okay. None of them have been like big. It's like they blow over pretty fast. So
Yeah.
still waiting for our
You
good
feeling
friend
okay?
Mr. Girl to
Yeah.
drop his
Oh yeah.
big expose. Someday it's coming.
Are you gonna respond to that?
The more I think about it, the more I think I just shouldn't say anything at all. Like let it, because right now he has no reach. Chud might go over it, but I honestly I don't like to talk about it much because I feel like I'm giving him free tips. But like he needs to find a way to make it way more concise than it actually is. And yeah, because apparently it's like
Brevity's
150
everything.
pages right now. Yeah, and I also think that the problem is I think that, keep in mind, I think he's legitimately mentally ill. He's like at the very least like personality disordered. So I don't know if he's capable of sifting through what's important or what's not. And if he thinks that everything is like the most horrible sexually abusive shit or whatever, then like it's going to be very easy to tear down the article based on a lot of the weaker evidence in there, right? Like if he's got like one or two really shocking stories about me like trading sex for airtime or some shit, he should just expand on that, and then that's the whole article. But he's going to have like 150 things of like random things I've said to Lav and him or whatever that's going to undermine everything else in there, I think.
Yeah.
Did you hear the recent thing where he said that he was upset, or he was talking about me calling him a pedophile?
Yeah. Why'd you do that?
I didn't. In a message
Didn't
that
you say he was a rapist?
yeah, he is that though. But
Oh, I
in
should have said that. Right?
well, yeah, but in a message I made to Lav, I was expressing my frustrations one of the nights after I called her or DM'd her, and I said some shit where I was like, do you know how fucking annoying it is that that like a guy that's known on the internet as like the pedophile cuties dude is running around DMing every single new woman I talked to on stream. And Mr. Girl
So you
posted,
said that he's known as that.
Yeah.
But you didn't call him that.
yeah, but Mr. Girl's saying like this is a way of Destiny like covertly calling me a pedophile without actually owning the position. I'm like, no, that's not even what that conversation was about. But yeah, but there's like I see him do like
calling you that guy.
Yeah, true. I see so many people. I see him making so many quote unquote mistakes like that. Or there's also unbelievable mistakes, right? So he's been working on this article for months. So he must be like obsessively going over all the material and shit. But then like he did this weird thing on Twitter where somebody, I don't remember why, but it came up where he was like, I've never called Destiny my boss before. I don't know why you would say that. Post a link to that or I'm blocking you. And then like immediately there's like 20 times where he said like Destiny is our boss. He's all of our bosses. And it's like, if you've been working on this article for so long, how the fuck did you forget that? Right? Like that's like a pretty big point of your criticism. So like, I don't even know like what's going on in his brain right now in terms of like how he's like handling everything. Cause it seems like he's just living in another world.
Is there anything you regret about do you ever think about those things? Like honestly have a conversation like, oh, there's some things I should say to certain frequent guests on my stream that because I have a position of authority, I have to be careful about X. Is there any? Do you ever have a moment of
I try to warn
reflection?
people about like abuse and stuff, but it's really hard because people just don't know until it happens, you know. And it's hard to know. Like even like it was funny because even the Farrah girl, the one that clipped me or whatever, like she's been going through a ton of stress over like all the stuff getting posted. And it's funny to see how different people react to things because she's got like 2 million fucking followers on TikTok. She's been through the Fresh and Fit ringer, but like everybody handles like different things a bit differently, and there's no real way to like prepare somebody for it. So I can tell people things, but at the end of the day, like that's kind of all I can do, you know.
Yeah. You kind of said some stupid shit though, huh?
What do you mean?
Well, we don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but that clip kind of sussed me out.
What do you mean?
You know what I mean.
Wait, I don't know what you mean. Wait, just say it.
The clip that Farrah posted.
Oh. Yeah, wait, but do you know why it was so weird? Wait, have you followed any of this?
Yeah, I think so. I've tried.
Wait, do you know what
a lot of it was cut?
Yeah, wait, do you know what my original statement was?
Yeah, make the statement.
Oh, okay, maybe you haven't. Sorry. I agree, the clip was super sus. We were having a conversation, and I'm pretty sure the conversation had something to do with, she was like, what do you think is the thing that contributes the most to rape today? And I said that, I think the problem is like, I think I said it was like, men are socialized to be too aggressive, and women are socialized to be too passive. It was something like that. But the first part of that answer got cut out. So when it was asked, like, what do you think is the biggest contributor to rape today? It just had my criticism of the woman. And then it made it look like I'm saying like rape happens because women are too passive, basically.
Which, yeah, do you think that I don't know, we don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but
why not?
But that statement by itself, even what do you mean why?
Wait, why don't we have to get into it? You can talk about it if you want. You're not gonna bother me.
Okay. All right. I mean, if you want to, yeah. I just think that
I would stand by that statement 100%. Yeah, of course. Why do you think I shouldn't? Or what do you?
Which of these statements? The statement that
I think that we have a culture that on both sides creates rapes. I think that women are toxically passive, and I think that men are like toxically aggressive. And that if you put like a man and a woman, a man who's socialized to be too aggressive when it comes to sexual boundaries, and a woman that's socialized to be too like giving into like sexual pressure, that like you're creating an environment where people are going to get raped over and over and over and over and over again, basically.
So toxic passivity contributes to rape.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, okay. What do you mean by rape?
When I say rape, I'm using like the expanded definition that everybody is using now, where it's like sexual coercion is included. So like if you bring a girl over and you get her a little bit too drunk, and then you guys like have sex, and you're not like technically getting like a clear yes, it seems like this is like the new age definition of like rape, I guess. But if we're talking about like super violent, like confrontational, violent interactions, whatever, then in that case, the woman's part of like the being passive probably significantly reduces the contribution to that environment.
Yeah, I guess my first and principal problem with it is of what you just said. One is, I think that whatever definition you're using for rape should not include any consensual activity. Fair?
Well,
I think
yeah,
all
but then
rape,
the debate is like, well, what is the consensual, right?
Well, I guess so. Then that's where the debate happens as applied to consensual. But I think that you should agree with me that we should not accept any definition of rape that includes consensual encounters. I think that's reasonable to say.
I mean, if you want to, yeah, I would say so.
Wait, why would you not agree with me?
Because that's not how, unfortunately today, that's not how like most people use it.
You think people, when they talk about rape, include consensual encounters?
They include stuff that's fuzzy at the edges, I think.
Well, is there any, would anyone ever say, assume no fuzziness, right? A consensual encounter ought to be called rape? Other than cases in which there's, for whatever reason, you cannot consent because of age or because you're in a place where you're drunk or something or something.
Yeah, I think that's the issue. So like here's where we're at, like the fuzzy part, right? So let's say two people are flirting at a bar and they're kind of okay with each other, or the guy's obviously wants to fuck, the one's like, whatever. They get back to their apartment, they have a few more drinks. The woman is like kind of pretty drunk, and the guy starts like making moves, and she like doesn't really say no, and then they kind of go through with it. Like that's a story where like the one will be like, well, I had a freezing response. I didn't actually tell him that I wanted to, and then we had sex, but I never said no at any point. But like I don't think I wanted that to happen. Like people argue over whether or not that was consensual sex or not, basically.
Okay, then do you mind if I give you a hypothetical?
Go for it.
All right. Let's suppose that we have a relationship between two individuals, long-term relationship.
Oh, or actually, I'll let you do this hypothetical, unless...
Yeah.
Do you remember the first accusation that came out about Andrew Callahan?
No.
Fuck. That's a good one because that's a real life one.
You can probably refresh my memory. But
basically, she said that they both kind of got drunk and they were in bed. I think she makes it clear several times, I believe she says that she explicitly never said no. She never said no, but it still went along with it, and she thought that he was too drunk for that, and that he was kind of abusing the fact that she was intoxicated, basically, to get her to have sex, and there was like a lot of pressure, but she never explicitly...
I think my hypothetical will bring out aspects of that, which I think are useful to explore.
Okay.
So in my hypothetical, you have two individuals who are in a relationship, and for 10 years, they have the same sexual pattern. They, every day at a certain time, they, without much verbal dialogue or whatever, they have consensual sex, and it goes the same way, and they don't really talk, and they just have sex after work every day. Okay?
Okay.
And on the first day of the 11th year, the same pattern emerges. Only this time, the woman, without manifesting, or the man, one of the people, I'll say, without being gender specific, doesn't manifest any different like action, or like it doesn't feel any different, doesn't say anything, doesn't have any body language that demonstrates anything different, but it just has sex with their partner, and the person who didn't show any difference says that the sex was unwanted.
Okay.
And that that from their perspective it was non-consensual.
Okay.
Is that rape?
No, I'd say no, because there was like a general expectation that had been created and was followed through on over and over again. So.
Right. And so it's when we're talking about consent and rape, one of, I think, in most jurisdictions, I'd say, the absolute defenses to that crime is a person's reasonable belief about whether consent existed or not.
Yeah, I know, but that's like where that's where everything kind of gets fucked, right? That's probably where a lot of women complain about like lack of prosecution for rapes is because people will argue that there was a general expectation when there wasn't, especially around like alcohol. It seems to be the case.
Yeah, that's one of the places I think where you can have a factual disagreement about whether there was an expectation, whether what would a reasonable quote unquote person say with respect to an encounter. But I think in the easy case, right, where there's absolutely this established pattern, let's say, or whatever you want to call it.
Of course.
If there is no reasonable indication that someone did not consent after this established pattern, and there's no difference in their body language, I don't think anyone would call that rape. And that means it can't be enough when we're talking about immoral sex or quote unquote unwanted sex.
Sure.
To raise that to the level of quote unquote rape, it can't be enough just the subjective beliefs of the person making the accusation.
I mean, I can kind of agree with you here, but a lot of these conversations will come up in the realm of like hookup culture, right?
Yeah.
So like you don't have that established pattern of norms, unfortunately, right?
Right, and in which case it might make sense to have a high threshold for assuming or wanting to have some kind of really high thing for affirmative consent.
Yeah, which
whatever.
I don't necessarily disagree, but that's what you're talking about there. I think that your example, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think that your example is kind of assuming away all of the challenging questions, right?
Like assuming all the challenging factual questions.
Yeah,
I agree with that. That was the whole point of the hypothetical.
Sure.
Hypothetical, but to show you really that what we think will be rape depends on not just the subjective attitude of the woman actually, or the man or the person actually desiring the sex, but also on what reasonable people think would manifest consent. And that someone who, through no fault of their own, any ordinary person would assume consent, we would not call that rape.
Yeah, again, I understand what you're saying, but like that's where the challenging conversation is, right? Is what does constitute that, and that seems to be where a lot of the disagreement on the rape stuff.
So that's
is.
why I think your statement has a definitional problem when you're saying that toxic passivity contributes to rape.
Well, sure. When I say toxic passivity contributes to rape, I'm talking about rape, whereas in the common parlance, it seems to be defined as like coercion with alcohol or like social pressure. That seems to be like people are like a lot of people are considering that, or at least from the discourse I remember, a lot of people consider that first Andrew Callahan story to be that like, oh yeah, this was like very rapey behavior, even though the girl herself explicitly said multiple times that she never said no or expressed any sort of disagreement ever like that. But then these things come up where people are like, oh, well, there was like the freezing response, stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, then it seems like that's the...
Yeah, but what I mean to say is, I don't think that all those cases are necessarily rape. So let me give you an example.
I don't either, by the way, but yeah.
Okay. So just pressuring someone to have sex and saying, please have sex with me, please have sex with me, please have sex with me. Just doing that and that person having sex with you, is that rape?
If someone says, please have sex, and then you do that, is that rape?
Yeah, is all pressured sex rape?
That seems to be where we're at right now, yeah.
You can't, I mean...
I mean, you can laugh, but like yes. What you're saying right there is all pressured sex rape? I believe a lot of people would answer that question with yes. They would say yes, of course.
So then now we have to... Now we're in a bad situation.
Sure, I agree. Yeah,
because the bad situation is this. Even just asking, hey, partner, I really, really want to. I know that whatever, you're not feeling well tonight, but I could really enjoy some sex right now. I want to have sex with you, right? That by itself, that's pressure.
Sure.
Is that rape?
I mean, I wouldn't consider it to be rape, no. But within relationships, again, I think like a lot of these conversations are relating to hookup culture, right? Like, if you think of the Me Too stuff that's all come out, it's not. I don't know of any famous ones that had to do with like I was dating this person and this happened. All of these seem to be related to like one-off or to like one-night stands or casual sexual interactions. That's where most of the conversation. I think you hit the nail on
the head, which is that a lot of these Me Too stories, as bad as they are, and sometimes enough pressure, I think, will break the consent line where you totally, let's say that I put a gun to your head, and true coercion, that's a form of pressure. If you're like over some significant amount of pressure beyond what a reasonable person would expect to make a quote unquote free choice or free willing decision will cross the consent barrier. But a lot of the things that were happening.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna say something I disagree with. The question is, you keep saying like, well, when reasonable, like you're begging away all of the hard stuff. What is reasonable pressure? That's where all the conversation is. But you're like, well, if we know what reasonable pressure is and you do too much of it, then that's rape. Yeah, of course. But that's where all the conversation is right now.
I know that's where the conversation is. I'm not trying. I'm just trying to analytically give us categories, and those categories. Rape cannot cover all pressured sex.
Yeah,
That's
I
too
agree
broad.
with you, but that seems to be.
You can't use it that way. Don't use it that way.
But if I'm being asked a question about their definition of rape, I mean, I guess I could say, well, let's define, but that would have been cut out for the TikTok clip anyway. But like, I could say like, well, hold on, well, how are we defining rape and blah 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 blah. Well, if you're going to define rape as pressured sex, then blah 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 blah.
You actually have to. No, you actually have to do that, because if you're and also something that I've seen you do is you're plugging in stats from rape statistics, which could be helpful. But if you have a different definition of rape, which is much more broad, right, than what the stats you are citing to are using, you need to have some coherence in your definition of rape. And it can't just be any pressured encounter, because then you're having questions about like whether me asking you 4 times to have sex with me is rape versus just, pressuring you to have sex. And I think a lot of the encounters that you would describe, where it's like, come on, I don't want to wear a condom. I don't want to wear a condom. Please, please. And it's not like no active like aggression in terms of forceful aggression, and no like, let's say we're even at the other person's house and you just please.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to disagree with anything you're saying. Yeah.
That's not, you would, and they're like, fine, you don't have to wear a condom. That's not rape, right?
I wouldn't say it is, but there are a decent number of people today I think that would. I think so.
You need to be careful, because I don't think that you should be perpetuating a definition of rape.
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying, but then I'm going to get like, but then that would give me like even more canceled. So like when someone's like, oh, what about the Andrew Callahan rape? I go, oh, I don't think it's rape. Like that, then I may even like in a worse position.
You need to have a vocabulary to describe unethical or bad sex, or some amount of unethical sex that is not rape.
Yeah, if I was arguing with like you and like 2 other lawyers, I think I would agree. But I think that for the purposes of having this conversation, I think that battle might be lost. Like, I don't know if I would try to redefine rape in every single conversation. I feel like I kind of have to just move along with where the culture is at.
You can't. And just to be clear, the law doesn't agree on the definition of rape. The definition of, for
yeah, but we're not talking. Hold
changed.
on. No one is talking about the legal definition of rape here.
I don't know, but you just said if I was talking with some lawyers, and so I just want to be clear.
I'm sorry. When I say lawyers, I just mean people that like want to have like an analytical conversation regarding blah blah blah. The reality is that if I got into a conversation, I was like, oh no, hold on, we can talk about this scenario. I don't think that's rape though. By the way, like I'm already at that point. Like, that's not rape. What do you mean? He coerced her. There was a power differential. He asked multiple times, even though she said no. That's rape. Like. Then all of my conversation would change from like, okay, well, what contributes to these negative environments to like, well, what do we even define as rape? I feel like that's where the conversation would be at then.
But otherwise you make unfortunate statements, I think, which are like toxic passivity contributes to rape. And what you mean to say is toxic passivity leads to unwanted or unethical sex that is oftentimes consensual.
Sure,
really,
I can
the key examples that you're using.
Hold on. I understand what you're saying. I don't know what type of advice you're giving right now. Are you giving me optics advice or better conversation? Because what you just said, that statement, I think the statement that you just made, I could see that being used as an even worse cudgel against me. Then instead of me saying toxic passivity contributes to rape, Destiny calls rape unethical sex. Like, I could see somebody blowing that clip up and saying, like, he doesn't even think it's rape. He just calls it, he's got a whole other word for it.
They're already blowing clips up on you.
Sure, I know, but I'm just saying that I don't think your advice gets me any closer to, like, having, like, a less clipped conversation. Like, if I'm making something like, oh, yeah, the Andrew Callahan stuff, the Aziz and Ansari, that wasn't rape. I don't even consider that rape. Like,
I'm not even talking about optics at the moment. I think that I'm only focused on the substantive statement, which is, and is it true, right? Is it true that toxic passivity leads to rape in the way that we would say leads to or contributes to rape? If rape assumes some kind of boundary crossing in the first place, and an established boundary in the first place, and what a reasonable person would interpret to be a boundary, and that boundary being consent, then it would seem that like part of what it is to attempt to rape or to have a rape is to have a boundary asserted in some reasonable fashion. And in that case, it kind of seems definitionally problematic to say that the passivity or the lack of boundaries or the lack of assertion of boundaries leads to rape if rape or an attempted rape assumes that in the first place. Does that make any sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of. It's just, I don't know if definitionally if that's the definition I'm working with any other person. Like last night, I had people fucking screaming me and blowing fucking clips up on Twitter right now because I said that fucking a 16-year-old is technically pedophilia, right? And that's definition like very clear, right? That's like crystal clear. You're not a pedophile for 16-year-old. That's just full stop. But even on that, people are like, oh my god, you're justifying pedophilia, right? I'm not justifying fucking minors. I'm not justifying it. I'm just giving a definition. So I feel like if in the rape thing, if I were to say like, oh well, what Andrew Callahan did maybe was unethical, but I don't know the unethical sex, but I don't think consider that to be rape. I think that would just be like where people's minds go, and it would just like it'd be.
Then that's a huge problem. And that,
I agree, it's a huge problem. That's why I think that all these conversations are so fucking dog shit. Yeah,
you're contributing. I think that with respect, and all the deference that you're owed, which I don't know how much on this issue, but at least on your stream, I think that you're contributing to it.
So instead, so every single conversation that I fight with now, instead of actually talking about any culture-related issues, I just need to be arguing constantly about what the definition of rape is.
No, you just need to establish that. It's like when I'm talking about rape, I am talking about sexual encounters, typically with penetration without consent. And that's not a legal definition, by the way. It's for me, if you're fighting with someone and saying, do you think that consensual encounters are rape? And
yeah, but they're going to argue, again, we're begging away the question. They're going to argue with what is consensual.
Right. So, but then you have to establish that there's more than one category here of unethical sex. There's unethical sex that is rape, and there's unethical sex that is not rape. And that way, you can have some clarity and say, all right.
Is that going to be clarity with most people that argue that there are forms of unethical sex that is not rape?
You agree with that? And
I do, yeah, but I could never. I'm not gonna be able to give that conversation to most people that are on the other side of this. They lose their fucking mind as soon as you even say the word rape. I agree with you. If we were having a discussion, yeah, I think that's a good distinction to draw. That was one of my biggest arguments. Is that like it seems like we can't talk about like bad sex or sex that like wasn't exactly. And I don't even mean bad. I mean, in terms of like, did we really want to be there? Like it all has to be either rape or not rape. I agree with you. That's shitty. But I don't know if I could have a nuanced conversation where I say, well, there are forms of unethical sex that I wouldn't consider.
So now
rape.
this is really bad. Now you're actually saying that in order not to have fights with people, just because you don't want to have that conversation, you actually are using rape to refer to all bad sex. That's what you just said.
Yes.
Or implying.
Yeah. Because I'd rather fight on. Okay, well, listen. You should venture in. Instead of having a definitional battle every single time. Yeah, of course. If I had a conversation, let's say I had a panel on, is it ethical to fuck like 15-year-olds? I'm not going to spend that entire panel arguing whether fucking 15-year-olds a pedophile. Because I don't care at that point. We're having a conversation on like minors having sex with adults, and that's what I'd focus on. And if they say, oh, that's pedophilia over and over again, I probably just let it slide. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sure, pedophilia, and then I argue there. I'm not going to fight on the definition for the whole conversation.
Buddy, I love you, but I just want to repeat one more time and make sure that I got this right. In your conversations with people, it is true that you're using rape as a catch-all term to refer to any bad or unethical sex.
Essentially, yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah, I do too. But like, what I mean,
you can't do that.
Okay. I would love to watch you have those conversations. Go for it. Because I'm 99% positive that in your world, every single conversation I'm having is just going to be fighting over the definition of rape over and over and over and over and over again. And then you don't even get to talk about anything meaningful at that point.
Oh, okay, you're not talking about any meaningful without distinguishing. If you are not, because then if that's what rape means to you, then what definitions are you using to draw your data from? You know, is your data on resistance referring to only violent sexual encounters, or is it referring to only the social and excluding the violent? Now you're after the races. You can't even cite stuff if you're using definitions that no one in the field is using.
I don't think anybody wants to cite any. We're not even at data-driven arguments yet for this. These are all just like social things or whatever.
Wait, come on. Are you telling me that
it leads to that, right? I think what he's trying to point out is like, do you think that it's healthy to label it that way?
No, I think it's fucking retarded. I think it's the dumbest thing in the
fucking world. Do that.
So then why participate?
Because I don't know if I want to have every single conversation be a debate on definitions, on definitionally what is rape. I'd rather just like seed it and then move past it and then say, okay, fuck it. Like, let's talk about like what contributes to these
You
types
just
of
said
cultures.
something extraordinary, Dustin. I just want to say.
Yeah, repeat what I said again, even though I disagree with it, and I'll agree with it again because you're going to exasperately say like, you just said it. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, not that part. Not that part. The part where you said this is not a data-driven argument. Your argument is data-driven, isn't it?
Well, no, we don't even get to that part of the argument. No.
You're talking about statistics related to how much better it is to have verbal resistance and to assert your boundaries, and you're telling me that's not data related, just your intuition?
No, because I think that if I had a conversation with one of these people, because there even is data out there. I think I've even tweeted studies before. Like if a woman says something about like a boundary, or I think it was like, I think it had to do with high schoolers learning how to assert boundaries stronger as part of sex ed training, have a reduced likelihood of getting raped. People will see that, but they'll philosophically fight you on the point that like, oh, like women shouldn't even have to assert boundaries. That's like, even that kind of training isn't even ethical or whatever. Like people will fight you before that. They're on like the philosophical grounds of like, what does it mean to consent or whatever, right?
Yeah, that makes,
like if I
it makes sense.
Because I think we had like I feel like I asked this question before that like if you could show that a woman doing X, Y, or Z action reduced the likelihood of it being like them being raped, would it be ethical to encourage women to do that? I think that people would fight you even on that, even if the data is clear. They're like, no, that's still unethical to say that women should have to do that thing.
Okay, so I
that's
understand.
Why I say
given,
like it could be data driven, but like I don't think a lot of people are at that part yet mentally where they think it has to do with the data.
I can like totally be sympathetic for you, given a lot of people you're having conversations with are not really in a place where it's like to have that whatever data conversation it is that you want to have. I understand that, but I think if you're giving any advice, right, that advice should be data driven. Otherwise, everyone can give you their. If your advice is not data driven, you're just saying it's just intuition and my experience with people in the world and my time living in person, and anyone can have their own intuition based argument, and maybe there's some people who like more people who agree with your intuition, but I had it understood that your advice about asserting boundaries based on data. It's based on something tangible and quantitative.
But I mean, like compared to like the child porn conversation, right? Where I can ask a person point blank. I almost said this last night with Aiden Ross, but I don't want to jump on it. If I say like, if you made some forms of child pornography available to pedophiles, if it led overall to less children getting raped, would you? But like, it's already over. It's over. No, you're done. You're already out the thing. So it's like, I don't think for a lot of these topics, people's minds aren't empirical or data driven. Like it's pure philosophy at this point. And the philosophy that they're on is that like it's bad to say anything to a woman to avoid rape because you're putting the moral responsibility on her. And more importantly, if any woman has gotten raped, you're blaming them for their actions. So
I don't think you can have a conversation about rape without defining it. And I don't think that you can have a reasonable conversation about rape without being more specific than just bad and immoral sex generally. It needs to be more specific than that. Otherwise, I think the conversation, you're just not talking to a person who is living in like the United States and speaks English. You're speaking with someone with proprietary language that's expanding. That it's the same thing that you critique all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you, but there are times
I don't use Nazis. Yeah,
sure, but there are times where like I'll just let it go because it's like, you know, like like even what you just said there for the Nazi thing. On my particular stream, I won't do it. When I'm defining rape, I won't do it. But if I go into like a room where we're going to debate about a bunch of people, it might have even happened, I think, on the No Jumper podcast where Fuentes is referred to as a Nazi a couple times. I'm not going to sit there and fight on there. Oh no, I wouldn't call him a Nazi. I'm not going to fight with that fucking definition there. Fuck that. We'll just, he's fine. He's a Nazi and we'll move on from there. Like I'm not going to fight definitionally with those people because it's not worth it. It doesn't get to any interesting part of the conversation.
He asked you like your definition of it, and that was the one that you gave. Though I think that was the point. Like,
well, he's saying that's the one he's using.
No, I'm saying that's what I'm using in these conversations. I think our current definition of rape is super fucking retarded, 100%. But again, like if you look at the majority of the Me Too's, I feel that come out, or at least a lot of the ones that I cover, a lot of them, like very few. Yeah, but bro, come on, are you fucking serious?
If it's the case that you think
I've already said that with like the fucking with the one girl and fucking Rich or whatever, I think, and people like call me like a rape apologist. I understand what you're saying. Like in an ideal world, I would say, but like holy shit,
those are terminally online people. Like anybody who's had like a little bit of like
bro, everybody is terminally online now. That's the world is terminally online.
I'm saying like yeah, the online people are online. Yeah, sure, but
no,
I'm saying
everybody
like,
is. Sorry,
anybody with half a fucking brain. That's had some interaction, like with understands like there's a little bit of a game, like a little cat and mouse. Like it's the man's job to like push a little bit, and then it's the female's job to like shut it down. And she's the gatekeeper. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would listen. I'd like to see you guys should manipulate, or I'm sorry, not manipulate. You guys should navigate some of these conversations. Like I would, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to listen. I just think that you should, if you're gonna have a fight on these things, you should have a fight that their conception of rape cannot possibly include consensual encounters, and that there has to be a difference between, you know, consensual bad or unethical sex and rape. And if there isn't, then you're just like not talking to someone who's worth talking to.
What do you do if like socially the majority of the conversation has moved to that point?
Do you think the majority of people consider rape to be any
in terms of the people that are having these conversations? I think so. That's what it feels like. Yeah.
I think if
Like,
you ask most people if can rape be consensual, they'd say no.
okay, here's a question. No, it's not. But you're begging the question so hard when you say consensual.
I don't think I'm begging the question.
You are begging the question because can rape with consent be rape? Well, no, because it's got consent. Of course not. But the argument isn't over whether rape with consent is rape. It's what is consent. That's when I say.
Well, the next step.
Wait. Here's a question. Here's a question. Okay, and I feel this way. I could be wrong, but I feel like if you were to poll people, does the majority of rape involve a woman explicitly saying no? I feel like the majority of people would at least for the people that are having these conversations, the majority of them would say most of the time the woman doesn't explicitly say no, but she doesn't have to say no.
Yeah, but that's not what we mean by consent. I know that's not what you're saying, that's what you think consent is. But we have to agree that there is a distinction between pressured but consensual sex and pressured and unconsensual sex, or
again, I agree with you. I don't disagree.
And if someone is not willing to grant that distinction, a distinction where your point might be correct, right? Your point about passivity might prevent a lot of unwanted and unethical sex, but to say it is a drastic contributor to rape itself, when I think the definition of rape requires a boundary cross or an attempted boundary cross, I think you're getting a ton of pushback on that, because I don't think that's what most people mean by rape. I think most people mean, when they think about rape, they're thinking about the worst of the worst, and that involves people with a malicious mindset who are.
Do you think most people consider that Aziz story? Do you think most people consider that story rape?
No.
Okay.
Do you think that?
It seems like it. That was the first one that started to get big pushback, but a lot of people talk about that story. I think consider him like a rapist after that. But I'm not sure. Maybe I should be polling that, or maybe.
But you would never sit here and say Aziz Ansari is a rapist.
Ever. I wouldn't. No, of course not. Absolutely not.
Then you should not. Then you should be consistent in your conversation. I do not expect you, and you should not change your language so drastically like that, where you would be willing to call Aziz a rapist in a conversation with these people, but not outside of it. That to me that can't be the case. Change your
I understand. It's just you're just telling me that I have to, that all of my conversations from now on about this need to just be about what is rape. That's essentially what you're committing me to.
Do you start with that? You start with a distinct. I don't think you'll get. There are some people. I grant you. There are some people who will get caught on that. But if you do not have an understanding with the person you're talking to about what rape is, how do you even have a conversation about rape? Right. That seems like.
Well, why
even have a conversation?
You can have the conversation just with the expanded definition where rape includes the coercive sexual events that don't necessarily involve like a crossing of an explicit boundary, right?
I guess, but then you're risking clips of you saying rape when I think
you can't use that argument. Stop. Hold on. You're doing the really weird, like shitty debate thing where you're using examples that are previously debunked. You can't say then there's going to be bad clips of you, because there's also going to be bad clips of me following your advice, where I say things like, "Oh, I don't think coercive sex is necessarily rape." That's a horrible clip. I need you to acknowledge that's a horrible clip for me, right? If I say something like coercive sexual environments that might even involve alcohol, I don't think that's rape necessarily. It's just unethical sex. Do you acknowledge that is a horrible clip?
That could be a bad clip. Yeah, that could be a bad clip.
All right.
All I'm going to tell you though is what I meant to say by that is not bad clip with respect to optics. Bad clip with respect to you sound wrong. You sound substantively incorrect. People are going to be like, wait, what? What do you mean? Like, if you're using rape to be an elastic thing to mean anything, now you're like all your advice is gonna be like totally, applying to totally different situations, and it might be wrong with respect. You're gonna miscommunicate. It's gonna be bad advice, right? Your advice is actually potentially gonna be harmful.
Can you give me an example of that? Can you ground that out?
Yeah. So you agree that it's possible certain techniques that are helpful for the coercive side are not helpful for the rape side. I'm not someone who knows the statistics, and so I'm not going to pretend that I know a lot about.
Sure, no. I'm just give me one example where I'm saying something and it's like, oh my god, like somebody misheard or misapplied this advice, so now for like a
let's say that you're actually correct that asserting a boundary or reasserting a boundary is very, very helpful to stop pressurized sex encounters generally. And then for whatever reason, the data comes out that in fact it's harmful for
well, if you're gonna
right?
if you're gonna invent like a totally new data point, then sure, then I would agree that would be bad. But as it stands right now, I don't think any advice you give to somebody for a coercive sexual situation would be bad advice for like a violent rape situation. I don't think that's true.
But go ahead. Do you have any data on that? I mean, like, how do we how do we know, right? Like if we are in a space where we're not delineating the difference between two potentially coercive sexual...
I'm trying to even fathom the case where a woman saying no or physically asserting boundaries is good in some situations, but like for a more extreme person, it's bad. Like I can't fathom it. Can you? That's why I'm asking for an example.
I don't know. I don't have data to.
No, I don't even need data. Just give me a hypothetical. Right? Like, is it that like if
why
a guy
would we do that?
Because I'm just trying to, I can't even get, I'm trying to fathom it right now. I'm trying to even, it's like hypothetically, let's imagine an animal that can fly into the sun. Now tell me what you think.
Like, I can give you one. Okay, you don't have to make another one up. All right. Sure. If you were just to tell somebody, like you're trying to give somebody advice, like, and they're being like raped, like physically assaulted and like, beat up, whatever. Like, obviously you're going to tell them like fight, like till your last breath, whatever. Like, punch him in the fucking face, whatever. But if somebody's just like making a pass and puts their fucking hand on your knee, you're not gonna be like, hey, punch him in the fucking face. Like, you're not gonna start at a 10. You know what I mean? Like, there is some delineation between like the advice that you would give for each situation, I guess.
Wait, hold on. I need you to walk me through that way more.
It's like conflating like murder versus
no, hold on, wait.
Just physical assault. Like,
you're giving me analogy. I'm saying very specifically. My question is what could you say to somebody for advice to avoid coercive, unethical sex that wouldn't also almost equally apply to somebody being like violently raped? That's what I'm asking for.
Yeah, but that's the point. Is I'm saying there's a difference between like always calling it the extreme and allowing like retards.
I understand, but the premise right now is that I might say something. I might say something that would work really well for an unethical, coercive sexual situation, but it would be horrible to use this like in a full-on rape situation. And I'm trying to think of like what is like a thing that you could say that would happen there.
Can I have 30 seconds?
You're not gonna start setting your boundaries whenever when it's already happening. You know what I mean? Like if you're already at a level 10, you're not gonna be like, I don't want to do anything tonight. Like I don't want to go into your place. Here, when you're getting like attacked in the car.
Do you acknowledge that there have been people who have come onto your stream and said something to the effect of this? Now, I don't know if this is true, but it's a story that could happen. It's not irrational to suppose that something like this, that what I'm about to say, could happen. Okay. That a person who asserts a boundary in a case of a violent rape gets, for whatever reason, like let's say that it's just in one particular case, gets worse results with respect to mental health, with respect to physical damage, maybe even they're killed, right? Where they wouldn't had they not. I know that you've had a lot of people tell you about that. I don't know the relative propensity or what the percentages are, and I'm sure that there's some data that says overall resistance is better for a lot of these encounters, but just assume that that the data isn't that way, right? And the data actually shows a disparity, which is, it's conceivable that there's a prototypical violent raper who, in response to an assertion of boundaries, gets incensed for some reason. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. In that case, that is not totally incoherent. You would be giving improper advice for one and proper for another, right? It's a coherent example. It's not.
That's okay. Well, at the very least, that's fathomable. So you're telling me that there might be that like physically asserting a boundary might be a good idea against somebody that is unethically sexually coercive, but against somebody that's sexually aggressive, it would be bad because they would kill you.
It's possible, right? Like, but that's why these kinds of, I think, distinctions matter. Between forceful rape and pressured rape, or whatever you want to say, and even more consensual and unethical sex. Those distinctions matter because they might result in different prescriptions, and they might have different data backing either one. Let's say you only have data on resistance for violent rape encounters, then surely you can only make statements.
So then on the flip side, then your advice would be to like you would say to a person like that, like you should just be passive because it'll increase your.
No, I'm not making any normative statement on the advice as such in this moment. All I'm saying is it matters to have conceptual clarity on what you mean by rape, and you're fighting me and saying, no, just use whatever expansive definition you want. How can it be a bad thing to clarify? How can it be a bad thing to come to an agreement about what this term means and know that the stats that you're using to back your story are actually within scope? Is that really such a big deal to agree on terms?
I would like it. You should just have some of these combos. I would just like to see you do it. Because I feel like the path you're walking me down is just committing me to basically an argument with every single person over like what is rape, and I feel like that's an argument that's been lost like 5 years ago. Like
the alternative to that is
The alternative is you work within the new definition of rape, and then you talk about like severe
How about
rapes
you ask
versus
them?
unsevere
How about you
rapes.
ask them? What do you mean by rape?
Sure, but I think they would give that. I think
What
they
do you
would.
think they'd say?
I think they would say that like things that involve like severely coercive situations, or some people might say things that don't involve enthusiastic consent can be rape. Basically, I think is where the definition is at right now. Which I think is, I think it's stupid, but I think that's where the conversation is right now.
But hang on a second. If that's the definition of, I just had a lisp for a second, my bad. If that's where the definition is at, that anything without enthusiastic consent is rape.
Like I think
and you
didn't they in Australia, didn't they try to get that passed as law, or have they already? That sex without enthusiastic consent might be considered sexual assault or rape, I think, or they might be trying to, but yeah.
I'm not going to pretend to know, but just keep in mind what you're saying here. If it's the case that you're accepting a definition of rape that is any non-enthusiastic consent equals rape, now there are tons of encounters that could be mutually enjoyable, that just isn't enthusiastic consent, that you are treating as the same category of thing as forcible violent rape. That can't be a good place to be.
It super can be, because we can have the category, we can have delineations within the category of like what's severe versus what's not severe, right? Like if I can say that like, well, if you're bleeding, like it's probably a good idea to get like a Band-Aid or something, and then you wouldn't challenge me and go, what do you mean? Bleeding could mean your whole arm got chopped off, and now you're telling a person to run to the cabinet and get a Band-Aid for their stump fucking elbow? Well, obviously there's gonna be like differences in categories within the spectrum of rape that people are talking about generally, right?
Yeah, so if you were to like, do you have any advice generally on bleeding?
Get a Band-Aid.
Is that your advice on bleeding?
Like, I don't know.
Would you ever say,
I'll
like,
start my
bleeding?
conversation off with like, how do you define rape? And then if they
Yes,
define
no,
it
no,
right,
wait.
yeah, and then if they define it really broadly, let's say,
literally-
well, let's go ahead and let's narrow this down a little bit.
Wait a second. If you're having a conversation about it, what the best thing to do is for bleeding, you're gonna be like, wait, what do you mean by bleeding? And someone just like, get a Band-Aid. And you're like, that's horrible general advice. Why? Well, you could be referring to a period. You could be referring to internal bleeding. You could be, and it's actually not. Is the Band-Aid advice super helpful? Like,
No, I would
give us
agree, but
general
there's
advice?
there's not like we don't talk about like bleeding culture. There's not like a hugely charged thing about it, right? Do you agree that there's something called like rape culture that exists in the United
Yes.
States? You understand rape culture has absolutely nothing to do with your definition of rape, right? Rape culture,
Yes.
as we understand it, has nothing. So you're asking me to
Yes and no, yes and no.
no. Come on.
yes and no. But
You
it's the
think-
same thing with racism, right? So like, there's a concept known as structural racism, right? That
Sure.
you agree does not overlap. Maybe there's one set of overlap with the actual definition of racism interpersonally, but you would always clarify that, and you would never say to someone, you know, you are racist just because you're white, even though you recognize a concept of structural racism that would impart to someone who is white some kind of advantage. And so before you would engage in a conversation, you actually had these conversations where you're calling someone a racist or you're giving advice for how to not be racist. You're going to clarify what you mean by racist. And if what you mean by racist includes things like just being white without adding the structural before it, you're going to have a lot of people misunderstanding you, I think, and you're going to have a lot of stupid conversations and people coming up afterwards to try to debate you on something you say and saying, no, I'm using, in this conversation with Eric Stryker, I'm using racism to mean this. In this conversation with Brianna Joy, what's her name? Brianna Gray Joy? Or Joy Gray?
I think it's Troy Gray, because Greyjoy is the Game of Thrones.
Oh, shit, my bad. Wait, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm using this definition. I think it can't hurt you to stick to a definition, and if you're gonna have to, for the purpose of the conversation moving on, incorporate some kind of
I think that
expansive definition. Yeah.
So something I've spoken about a lot before, we kind of get into this a little bit with the terrorist thing. I think the issue with like these words is these words are ethically loaded. They're normatively loaded words. People say rape not because they actually care about anything that happened. They say rape because they want to bring all the moral gravity of rape into what happened. And the reason why I feel like people, and I could be wrong, I don't know, like I said, you should argue with Katie. I'll watch you do this, or argue with Kelly or somebody.
Sure.
When you say something like unethical sexual intercourse or unethical sexual activity, it feels like you
Yeah.
robbed that of all of the moral loading that the word rape has. And I feel like it's what people will fight you on. So for instance, like last night with my conversation with Aiden and Sneeko, where they were like, you're saying a 29-year-old that fucks a 16-year-old isn't a pedophile? Then they go on to say you're justifying it. And in their mind, it makes sense that I'm justifying it because by removing
That's
the
a
use
good
of the word
point.
pedophile, they're thinking that I'm taking the moral weight away from the activity. So I think that's what I feel like if I try to say, well, hold on, what just happened wasn't rape. Like, yeah, it was unethical, but it's not rape. People are saying, oh, so you're justifying it. This is why I think I get called a rape apologist in every single conversation I have. But I mean, like, I can try and
understand. You know
I can
what?
try, like, I'll open with the, like, let's define
I'll say
rape and
this.
the fight with there, but yeah.
I'll say this. I appreciate that you're in an impossible situation. And you're in a very difficult situation because no matter what, if you call it rape when you personally think it's not rape, which is what you're saying you're doing. What you're saying you're doing is that you're calling things that you personally consider not rape to be rape for the sake of these
Where the conversation is basically.
unhinged people, right? I think that I understand why you want to do that so that you don't look bad or that you can have an actual fruitful conversation. But if what you're saying is that rape has a very high moral connotation or something like that, and you're using an expansive definition of it, then in the context of these conversations with people who aren't willing to have a more specific definition, you're accepting that you're using that moral condemnation inappropriately. Right? You're using
I agree, but that's another argument.
Don't deserve it.
Yeah, I agree. but if that's where the whole conversation is moved, then it's like, I can sit here screaming at like the clouds, like, well, we should keep defining this in a certain way.
But have you ever had a sexual encounter that you feel is unethical, where you've been unethical in a sexual encounter?
Yeah, probably. The Mia Rose shit, arguably, right?
Yeah. So then, I don't think you should be conceding that you would call yourself a rapist.
I am a rapist.
No,
Proudly.
Don't call yourself a rapist if
Wait.
what you mean is I behave shittily in sex, maybe once or twice, right? Like that does not make you a rapist. And if someone were to accuse Destiny of rape, you would never be like, oh, okay, well I'm chill with the expansive definition of rape. If it were applied to you, you would want some consistency in terms. And I think it's not unfair for me to ask you to like, when you're applying it generally or applying it to a particular case example, I'm sure the people you're talking about wouldn't appreciate you using some loosey-goosey expansive definition without any connection, I think, to what people refer to rape as, which is a non-consensual activity.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, I guess I'll try fighting. If I get canceled for my next debate where I'm saying like, well, actually, getting somebody drunk and fucking them, I don't actually consider that to be rape. Like it just feels like there's so many little clever like progressive tricks to say, oh well, she froze up, or oh the power differential, or oh she was like there's so many tricks to say like, oh
I actually think
like,
that I actually think that will open up better conversations because that will get a conversation about societal norms. Like, should we consider it a reasonable person having consented if they have any alcohol? Or should we have? What should it look like? What should?
Well, that's like this is. I don't know
like?
if I don't know if Farrah will include this, but like there's something to argue too, and like even her roommate's got involved in this. I don't think she's gonna post this, but like here's a question for you: if two people are blackout drunk and then the guy fucks the girl while they're both blackout drunk, is that considered rape? Would you consider rape?
I think in that case, it's possible both committed rape, right? Because both are in a position where they cannot consent.
Yeah, but they also both lack agency to choose to rape, right? We consider.
Yeah, but that would never excuse someone who had sex with an unwilling or non-consenting person who was sober, right? It's not an excuse for rape to say I'm drunk, right? It's what a reasonable person in your position would see, and a reasonable person in your position isn't blackout drunk.
So then then it's double rape. That's the ethically. Well, I'm just curious.
I mean, it's a hard case, but if that's what your definition demands, that's why it's useful to have a definition, right? That's why it's useful to have a definition. And maybe you want to have a carve out for cases of mutual intoxication where both people seem to be consenting, at least to the initial act of alcohol with the knowledge that it could lead to sex. Maybe you want to have a carve out for that, but the only way you're going to have a carve out is if you define with specificity initially. Then you can make your carve outs. Then you can do what's reasonable in society. Then you can have a more precise conversation. But if you're just going to say any unethical sex, then I guess that would be rape by your definition, your expansive definition. That's
Well,
without
hold on,
question
don't
rape.
stop saying my definition. It's the
bad.
one that I choose to
The
participate
one that you're
in.
using,
Because-
the one that you
yeah.
choose to participate in, that would unquestionably be rape, right?
Uh-huh.
At least if you clarify initially, you can have a conversation about potential carve-outs or is this a cluster concept? Does it have a requirement, a necessary condition that is missing in the case of mutual intoxication?
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's why I'm encouraging some conceptual clarity. I don't think that's too much to ask for.
I mean, I don't either, but yeah, we'll try it. I'll try it. Next conversation,
Yeah.
okay? How do you define rape? Let's get into this.
Oh yeah, or you're doing the
No,
actual,
yeah, I'll try asking.
Are you asking
but,
me?
But no, I'm not asking you.
Oh, okay.
It just feels like, I feel like I'm gonna get buried on. It's just gonna sound like I'm defending rapists again, because like, oh, you don't even want to call this rape. Like, I think that is exactly what happened with the pedophile
That's
thing.
what
It's
women
like,
are
what do you
accusing of
consider a
you
pedophile?
now. Wait,
And
wait.
yeah?
That's what they're accusing of you now. They're saying you're defending rapists and you're blaming victims. And you're buying apparently their definition.
Yeah, sure, but at least I get
So
to
how
have a
could it get any
slightly
worse?
more interesting conversation in terms of like, what do we do to avoid these types of cultures or situations, rather than like the conversation like, well, just how do we define rape, right? But I mean, all of it is like dog shit conversations. I mean, I agree, like it sucks either way, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's a pretty dog shit public conversation right now, but
Yeah. Sorry, it got all heated. I didn't,
No,
I
that's
just wanted
good.
to chill, talk about Trump.
okay. Yeah, do you think
Yeah.
Trump's a rapist?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't have any evidence specifically that he raped
I
someone.
mean, he
Do you?
did grab some poontang. You know what I mean?
Yeah, supposedly that did happen. You don't think that's enough?
Well, I think that usually rape requires either penetration or touching of genitals. I think that people would a non-consensual of that. And
Wait, what if
so
you like
I think-
face fuck somebody? Is that not rape to you?
Yeah, so any touching, I think, under how I would view, I think a progressive definition of rape, I think would include genital touching or oral penetration by either party, right? So it's possible to rape someone being orally penetrated and to rape someone else orally penetrating them. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, good talk.
Yeah, been fun. Stay safe. Where
When are you
are
coming
we
up to the
expecting
city?
these? I don't know. I'm traveling so much next month. We're expecting something by like Tuesday or Wednesday, right?
That's what Trump said. I wouldn't mark your calendar for Tuesday and be like, if it doesn't happen, it's not happening.
I feel like the worst outcome for everything is if he's indicted and then goes to court and is innocent.
What's the what's the spark notes? Because that was why I joined too. I was listening to the Trump discussion. I don't even know what charges are being brought against him.
Donald Trump
Work,
paid
like,
Cohen
too
hush
much.
money to give to Stormy Daniels, and
Stormy
he lied
Daniels.
about what the contents of those payments were.
Oh,
He said
yeah.
it was for legal expenses, when in reality he was using campaign funds to pay off somebody for keeping something
I see.
quiet. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be violating business records laws in New York or money laundering stuff. Probably won't be failure to disclose campaign finance stuff, I don't think, because I think that's a federal criminal offense. So it'll probably be New York State crimes. All right. See you later, Dest.
Be careful, I
Have
love
a
it.
good stream.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always.
Later, Nacho.
See you, man.
Okay, I'm talking to the crazy Muslim dude in a second. Give me a sec, I'll be back, and then we can chat too if you want. 1 sec, be back. Don't die.
Okay.